Hello and welcome to the multidisciplinary webinar. I am your not your moderator, I am your MC, Jody Ann Bigby, and this month's topic is employee engagement, re-engaging employees in the new normal. Now, a little bit about our monthly multidisciplinary webinar. This webinar, which we host on the fourth Thursday of every month at noon Eastern Time, is intended for professionals and leaders who want to develop a multidisciplinary awareness of various disciplines, ranging from emerging and trending technologies, organizational improvement, engineering, data analytics, social transformation, and other topics. The webinar is recorded and circulated for the benefit of professionals who are within our circle. Now, your webinar host is ICAT Professional Services. ICAT Professional Services is your partner for professional development, talent source, data analytics, and societal impact. Service offerings include Career Academy, outsourcing staffing and recruitment, applied data analytics, and social enterprise. For more information about ICAT, which makes your people and data greater, visit www.icat.net. ICAT Career Academy Credentialed Training offers the following 5 credentialed programs: Scaled Agile POPM, CompTIA A+, CompTIA Network Plus, CompTIA Security Plus, and Agile Instructional Design Practitioner. Again, for more information, visit www.icat.net. ICAT is also co-sponsoring an upcoming training with ISPI Potomac on Scaled Agile POPM. This special training takes place on June 8th to the 11th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. If you are looking to sharpen your skills in Scaled Agile POPM, visit the ICAT website or ISPI website for more information and registration details. Now, these valuable and enriching webinars wouldn't be possible without our sponsors. We now welcome our sponsors to share a few words about their organizations. You will now hear from Peter Beverso of ISPI Potomac, our event co-sponsor. Peter, we thank you, and we thank ISPI Potomac for your support. Please take the next 30 seconds to tell the audience all about your organization.
Well, thanks, Jody Ann. I'm really happy to be here, and ISPI Potomac is happy to be a partner with ICAT and a co-sponsor. ISPI was founded on the lands of the Pikastawe, Nacotchtank, and Manahoac Native Americans in the DC, Northern Virginia, and Maryland area. And we're the professional home for people that work in organizational development, learning, leadership, but really what we are is a sharing community. So one of the things that makes us special is our commitment to community and collaboration, to a global audience, sharing what we learned. One thing that makes us very unique is we're not competitive, we're there to help each other. So we're really happy to be here and part of the community and the circle. So thanks, Jody Ann. And for more information, please visit ispidc.org. And my email address is pbeverso@ventivia.com, and I'm the current president.
Thank you so much, Peter. Now, next, you will hear from another co-sponsor, the Professionista LLC, from its founder and CEO, yours truly. Now, the Professionista LLC works with lifestyle brands and small businesses to develop branding, marketing, and communication strategies that build brand awareness, drive revenue, and connect them with their ideal clients, customers, and communities in creative and memorable ways. The Professionista LLC provides brand identity development, communication strategy, business consulting, particularly startup strategy, as well as empowerment speaking and voiceover artistry. Because, hey, what's a communication strategy without a voice to deliver it? So if your organization needs the right strategy to get your brand or business off the ground, and or a powerful voice to carry your message to your market in a way that's memorable and compelling, go ahead and text your organization's name and the word strategy or voice to 678-694-7763 today. Now, our next sponsor is Benjamin Preston LLC. And you will hear from its founder and author of the book, Harness Your Butterflies, Benjamin Preston. Now, Benjamin, take the next 30 seconds to tell the audience all about Benjamin Preston LLC.
Hi, great to be here. So Benjamin Preston LLC is a company that is based off of, it works with both individuals on professional development and career coaching, as well as businesses to help with their kind of business strategy, marketing, and operational support, as well as leveraging their resources internally. And all of the programs and consulting is based off of my book, Harness Your Butterflies, which I've also turned into a career course called the Career Accelerator Program. And I leverage a lot of this work providing business and marketing and strategy support based on my previous working experience. So great to be here.
And we're so glad to have you, Benjamin. Thank you. So for more information, again, visit benjaminpreston.com. We so appreciate our illustrious sponsors. We couldn't provide this service to our professional community without you. So thank you for your support. And before we start today's webinar, we would like to invite you to join us for the next one. Mark your calendars and make plans to Mark your calendars and make plans to attend the next multidisciplinary webinar on Thursday, March 25th, 2021 at noon Eastern Time. The topic: applying artificial intelligence to improve everyday life. Now, for those of you who are joining us live, you have several webinar tools that you can use to enhance your experience. We invite you to engage in the chat and share any questions, comments, suggestions, and more that you may have. And if time permits and we're able to open the floor for Q&A at the end, you may raise your hand to ask a question and utilize the unmute feature to ask your question live when you are called upon. Also, let us know what you think of the webinar in the chat area. We appreciate your feedback and we thank you in advance. Now, let's jump right into the main event. Today's panelists are led by Jonathan Tessier, certified professional coach, who will discuss what is employee engagement and why is it important. He will be followed by Benjamin Preston, marketer and business strategist, who will provide an overview of post-pandemic strategy. And finally, you will hear from me, Jody Ann Bigby, branding and communication strategist, on creating a culture of community. So please join me in welcoming our first panelist and panel leader, Jonathan Tessier. Jonathan, take it away.
Thank you, Jody Ann. Really appreciate that. And welcome everybody to our look into employee engagement. And I always thought it was important to sort of level set on what we think employee engagement is before we start to look at how it's starting to look going forward as a result of everything we've gone through with coronavirus and how it's impacted businesses. So let's start by really thinking about exactly what employee engagement is. I mean, we hear that term all the time, and it kind of helps to think, okay, what do I really see employee engagement as? So what I'd like to do is just start off with a quick little exercise. And if you could go to the next slide, what I'd like to do here is, sometimes if we have like a metaphor in mind about what something is or what we think something is, that can really help us, again, benchmark where we're at and then start to look at employee engagement going forward. So here's a little activity for you. I want you to think for a moment about what you think employee engagement means to you. And then I'd like you to choose one of these 4 listed bulleted items. So how might employee engagement be like building a pyramid? How might it like be an ocean liner? How is it like an artist? Or how is it like bumper cars? So just pick one of those and tell us how you think employee engagement is like one of those things. So let me give you an example to sort of warm us up to this idea. So for me, employee engagement is like building a pyramid. You need a really strong and wide, solid foundation if you want to create something that reaches into the sky. So I'd like to hear from a couple of you. What is employee engagement like to you? Pick one of them and let us know. You can speak out loud, or if you want, just put it in the chat. Again, how might employee engagement be like one of these items? Let's hear from a couple of you. Okay, we have Savannah saying that it's like an ocean liner. You constantly needs to be improving to stay current. Love it. Gabe says an artist, be engaged in creative process and self-expression. I love that too. Great examples. And if we could hear from a couple more people, that would be awesome. How is employee engagement like these items listed here? Going once, twice. All right, let's go ahead and, got another one from Max. Thank you, Max, appreciate it. He also chose an ocean liner, cruising through the ocean, achieving our goal. Yep, I love that, absolutely. And Deborah, like bumper cars? Okay. And, you know, sometimes bumper cars can be like bumpy, or it can also be fun. So another way of looking at it. One of the common things that we're starting to pick up on here with employee engagement is that it has a lot to do with emotions. And so let's take a moment here of looking at what exactly is employee engagement, how we define it, and then we'll start to see about what we need to do with it going forward. So next slide. All right, so what exactly is employee engagement anyway? Well, an engaged employee is one who is fully absorbed by and enthusiastic about their work and the organization that they work for. So as I mentioned just a moment ago, employee engagement has a lot to do with the emotional commitment the employee has to an organization and its goals. This emotional commitment means that engaged employees actually care about their work and they care about the company that they work for. So employee engagement expert David Macleod says, this is about how we create the conditions in which employees offer more of their capability and their potential. So employee engagement, if we wanted to really think about what it is, it's about being included fully as a member of the organization, of a team. It's drawing out a deeper commitment from that employee. There's more there that employee could offer, and it comes with that commitment piece. And really what's great about employee engagement from an organizational standpoint is the more engaged and committed employees are, the more that organization's actions will end up being consistent with what their values are. And that's pretty important when we're talking about employee engagement. So with that in mind, let's look at the next idea of why is employee engagement so important. And what I'd like you to think about here is all the reasons that employees are saying why engagement is so important. So next slide, please. What you're looking at here on this slide is there's been lots of research done on when employees feel engaged. Remember, we're talking about emotions when we're talking about employee engagement. So what makes an employee feel engaged? And here are some of the top responses. Empowered, when they feel involved, when they feel consulted, when they feel supported, when they feel valued, when they feel like there's some good collaboration going on, when they feel they're doing meaningful work, and when they feel like there's a sense of belonging. Now, let me ask you another question here real quick. And again, you can shout it out or you can put it in the chat. When you think about your jobs you've held, maybe it's the current one, maybe it's an older one, but when you think about you being an employee, which of these listed here have made you feel most engaged in your employment? So again, just take a moment, type in which one of those have mattered most to you, and we'll read out a couple of the responses. And I'll start off by saying that if I feel supported, that really goes a long way in having me feel very engaged. Savannah says being consulted makes her feel valued. Max says empowered when you feel like a partner. Great. And Muna, I hope I'm saying your name right, when there's meaningful work, a sense of belonging. Gabe also chooses belongingness as an important reason for feeling engaged. Empowered from Mohammed. Thank you, Mohammed. That's awesome. Yeah, so a lot of us are going to feel engaged by how we feel generally, but specifically there are different things. Miranda, sense of purpose. Thank you, Miranda. Appreciate that. Now, let me go one step further here. Which of these two findings that are listed here do you feel are the top two that employees gave as what will make them feel most engaged? Which of those two would you choose as the top two? Again, you can tell us what they are, or you want to put them in the chat. Again, would love to hear from you. Which of those are the top two, do you think? Okay, Max gives a vote for empowered and involved. All right, thank you, Max. Jonathan says empowered and valued. Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate that. Savannah says involved and supported. Martha, collaboration and involvement. Thank you, Martha. Gabe, collaboration and meaningful work. Super. And one final call for any other people who'd like to respond. Deborah, thank you. Consulted and supported. Love that. All right. Well, what turned out to be the top two feelings that caused engagement were actually, number one, feeling valued, and number two, doing meaningful work. That tells us a lot about the emotions that people feel. You want to feel valued, and think about all that is involved with that idea of feeling valued, like you're appreciated by the employer. Okay, and that you do feel personally that you're doing work that's making a difference and that's meaningful to you. So keep that in mind as we go forward here as talking more about employee engagement. Next slide. So when we're talking about three of the top reasons why employee engagement matters so much, I want you to think about this now, switching gears from not the employee's perspective, but the employer's perspective. Here are your top three reasons why it matters for an organization to really be thinking about employee engagement. Number one is employee retention. Organizations with high engagement reduce both turnover and hiring costs. Disengaged employees are a major reason for high employee turnover. But employees who are engaged in their work and are behind the organization are more likely to be motivated and remain committed to their employer. So that's important, employee retention. Number 2 is employee productivity. Employees who are engaged at work are more likely to be productive on a consistent basis. And I think the key word there is consistent. I mean, we all have moments when we don't feel quite as into what we're doing as in other moments. But the idea here with productivity is to consistently be productive as much as possible. So companies with a high level engagement have typically reported higher productivity coming from their employees. And that's because, again, they feel great in the work environment that they're in. And finally, number 3 is higher quality. When employees are engaged, they are more likely to invest in the work that they do, which will lead to higher quality of the work that they are producing. Employees who are engaged are more involved and work harder, while disengaged employees are likely to only do the minimum just to get by. So, by investing in employee engagement, a company or an organization is going to be able to increase their productivity, their work quality, and they're going to be able to retain the top talent that they have. All right, so we know what employee engagement is. We know why it's important from both the employee perspective and from the employer perspective. Now let's move on to what can we do? How can we improve our employee engagement? So next slide. In a nutshell, one of the things that can make the biggest difference in employee engagement is communication. Employee engagement actually starts with communication as the most essential tool to develop strong working relationships among employees and to achieve that higher productivity. Companies that offer clear, precise communication can swiftly build trust. And again, going back to emotion as the important piece of employee engagement, trust is built on how we feel about the work we do in the company that we work for. So think about communication for a moment. Why is that so important? Because if employees lack any relevant, accurate, engaging information or instruction on how they're supposed to do their job, how can we expect them to do an effective performance on their job? We can't. We've got to communicate to them what is expected. And once they understand what's expected, then they're willing to go and work hard for it. So communication is really about setting clear expectations and to keep in mind that when employees lack guidelines on what is expected of them, they won't precisely know what it is they need to do, and there's a chance that as a result of that, they'll be less engaged. So I have up here on the slide 4 key things you can keep in mind that can ensure better employee engagement through communication. Number 1 is to develop clear internal lines of communication. Really take a look at how communicate disseminates in your organization and make sure that that's done in an efficient manner. 2, promote organizational transparency. Really communicate. And I know everyone probably thinks they do communicate enough, but I would even argue to over-communicate so that you ensure that transparency is there. 3, effectively communicate business plans and strategies. Make it a point to believe that everybody needs to know what's going on, that not just the managers or some key leaders, but everyone needs to know. That's the only way they're going to get behind something, is if they understand what it is. And finally, 4, recognize the efforts made by employees and reward them for that. I think that's probably the most important in my experiences, and I've been in managerial roles for 25 years, is people want to be recognized. Now, there may be different ways that people want to be recognized, but they still value and find it important to feel like they're being acknowledged for what it is they're doing. Next slide. So with all that said, and we talk about the idea of how coronavirus has impacted our organizations, let's keep in mind some employee engagement trends that are resulting from what we've encountered over the last year. Number one is keep in mind that we need to embrace more a flexible work environment. For many job functions, there are no definitive reasons why people have to come into an office every day. And same can be said for work being done between 9 and 5, right? Because the coronavirus has made coming back to work challenging, many leaders are focused on how to successfully adapt to a more digital work world. 2, reimagine the employee experience. Expecting your employees to leave their personal problems at home is less likely since they're now working from home. And since those two locations of where you work and where your home is have come together, we have to be more understanding of some of the personal situations that people are facing. Although it's an enormous responsibility to take on, leaders need to rethink how that employee experience looks, especially when times are difficult for employees. And finally, bring compassion to every conversation. Leaders of today need to be different. They need to be more empathetic. They need to think about people and society, and they need to really listen. Now is the time for leaders to take the opportunity to help form meaningful relationships, especially when we feel separated. So there's benefits to working at homes, but there's also benefits to feeling more isolated when we're not in the office. So these relationships are what will build a resilient workforce that can handle difficult situations. So I'll end by saying, think of your organization and any business as a living, breathing entity, and it is going to undergo change. And through that change, which might feel difficult at times, it will grow. And, our businesses will break and some will see cracks, but they will also heal. And so all of these trends that I just showed you and talked about here can really become vital for a company to recover from a crisis and live and thrive beyond that crisis. And with that, I appreciate your participation in my presentation, and I am going to hand it over to our next presenter. So thank you again for your involvement in kind of an overview of what employee engagement is, why it's important, and how we can improve upon it going forward. All right, so next slide. And I'm going to hand it over to Benjamin. And Benjamin, take it away.
Thanks. So I love, Jonathan, every time we present together, I always love when I go through your slides because everything is so spot on. Very well researched, and it's obviously the impact is there. And the thing that I look at, or I guess the next question that I have, if anybody is like me, the question that I have is, okay, so I have this pandemic that's happening. I have all these other changes that I need to be juggling or have been trying to juggle both operationally. I need to get my customers, satisfied and get our customer journeys all figured out. There's a lot of moving parts. And when it comes to employee engagement, I have found that one of the easiest ways to put employee engagement first is one of the things that Jonathan mentioned, which is communicating strategies and communicating plans, because you're doing those all the time. And the amount of strategy and planning that you can share with your employees really helps their teams mobilize and move toward what you're wanting to do. So the section that I have is talking about, from a business perspective, what are the types of engagement opportunities that do your teams have to leverage and move your business forward in a very kind of tangible, practical way. So next slide, please. So based on a lot of research and a lot of executive interviews done by a lot of advisory firms, such as McKinsey and Gartner, there are 3 primary, areas or categories or initiatives or priorities, whatever you want to call them, that businesses are going to be looking at post-pandemic, and they're calling it the post-pandemic strategy. And so this is kind of what we're going to be diving into. So The first category or initiative is operational and workflow changes. So what sort of things do you need to readjust or change in your organization to make it function better while including other things that allow for employee engagement, such as flexible working schedules? The second thing is emphasizing the customer experience. When we're talking about employee engagement, we really need to think about what can we tell our employees that doesn't hinder our bottom line, because we want to provide our employees with freedom while creating a better experience for our customers. And there's a way to do that effectively. So looking at the customer experience in a different lens during post-pandemic will allow for growth both in employee engagement as well as the customer experience. And the last thing is supporting employees, which goes back to Jonathan's point about the employee experience, which is talking through the remote and in-person experience that employees have and getting to the right clear, or to setting the clear expectations and providing the tools that they need to exceed. Because a lot of times employees would like to be better at their jobs, but sometimes they don't always have the resources to do so. So at this point, we're talking about kind of leveraging employees and activating them. With all of these changes happening, I'm curious to know, and drop this in the chat, what departments or what sections of the business are going to be most impacted with these changes post-pandemic? IT, that's a big one. Human resources training. What departments are going to be most impacted? We have IT, we have human resources and training. I have a marketing background, so marketing is always my go-to. Anybody else want to weigh in? Sales, customer service. Muna, I think you're getting to a good point. So Muna says, everyone, can you go to the next slide, please? So this is a heat map that I developed based off of the 3 different initiatives, and we look at the different types of support that every organization or every department is going to need to put in to make sure that the post-pandemic strategy is operating effectively. Now, the key here is to make sure that everyone's aware of kind of what's going on and then engaging them to their maximum potential to make sure that all of these are going off without a hitch. But what we can see, though, is that every department, to different degrees, every department is going to be impacted by every single thing that happens. And a lot of people will say that you're reinventing business or you're innovating or you're changing. All of those are the same thing to say that you're engaging employees in a way that hasn't been done before to move your business forward. And I think that things like pandemics or things like adverse situations is the best opportunity for innovation, because people are looking for it and your employees are looking up to you, both as a manager or an executive, to say, what changes should we be expecting? What can we plan for in the future? Next slide, please. Okay, so I talked about this a little bit, but what is the thing that you get out of this as you look at post-pandemic strategies? Why, if we're going to change, what are the things that we get out of this? You get increased productivity and digitally capable teams. I want to emphasize the digitally capable teams, because when you start doing your employee engagement initiatives, during the pandemic especially, I would say probably 98% of it is going to be digital, and making sure that your team members of all generations and all different departments are able to operate at the same capacity, both on digital platforms and in person, is critically important. The second thing is you want to gain customer loyalty and revenue growth, because you can't have employees without paying customers. So the more that you can kind of get your teams rallied behind building out a great customer experience or a great product, the more excited and engaged your teams are going to be, because they're going to see that bottom line go up. And the last thing is improving communication and goal setting among employees, which I know Jonathan talked about extensively, so I'm not going to dive too much into that right now. But that's kind of the what are we getting out of this as we implement this post-pandemic strategy. And then the last thing is going to be, how do we do that? So can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, So these are going to be, there's a lot of different things that you can do, but like with any strategy, you want to start with kind of the things that are going to be the most impactful down the road. So the very first thing that you want to do is leverage digital assets. That's both any video, any assets that are continual training or kind of document based brochures, anything like that. But then any other piece of asset that you would qualify as something that employees would find usable or helpful in their roles. So it might be a video or an annual report that not a lot of employees have looked at. That type of stuff is really great to communicate. If there's some sort of investor or stockholder letter, I know some companies do economic impact reports. All of that type of stuff is really, really helpful to disseminate to your employees to make sure that they're aware of the impact that the organization has and they can kind of understand the direction that we're heading as a company. The second thing is improving managers' digital communications. I have worked with a lot of managers who, when I introduced the idea of Zoom to them, some clients that I was working with, they were very unfamiliar with the idea. They were like, can we get on the phone call? And I was like, happy to do a phone call, but there's a totally different perspective when you actually can see people's face on Zoom and you can interact with them face to face. So giving managers the tools that they need to be able to interact with their teams in a way that's less intrusive and it doesn't feel as removed or passive. The third thing is to invest in automation tools. This is probably one of the biggest things. It's digitizing your company so that your employees have more time to innovate and create and kind of build those bonds internally within their teams. Automation tools like email automation, if it's a customer experience automation, it could be some sort of newsletter software. If you have a blog for your company or a SharePoint blog, it could be an automated tool to communicate automatically to employees when a new blog has been posted. All of those types of things are really important. Number 4, map and enhance the customer experience, which we talked about before. And a lot of customers now are starting to go toward earned media, as they're kind of preferring earned media over advertising. That will probably change after post-pandemic, but at the moment, a lot of customers are looking at earned media. So leveraging your teams and saying, hey, how can we do some really cool stuff and pitch the media? And the last thing is creating a network of employees. So if employees are no longer in the office, the power of influence is the dynamics of that have changed. And the employees who are more networked or who have more affiliate networks, that is to say you have one person in one department who can reach out to 5 or 6 other departments, is more valuable than one person who only knows people in the same department. So you really want to reinforce the idea of employees cross-collaborating across silos to create networks and really get stuff done at a faster pace, especially in a digital world. So with that, that is my time. And I think, Jonathan, I will hand it back to you.
Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate that. I hadn't really thought about that power of influence that comes from networks. That was a really insightful point for me in your presentation, so thank you for that. All right, we're going to hand it over now to Jody Ann, and she started us off at the beginning of the call by letting us know what we were going to cover. So Jody is going to take it away with creating a culture of community. So Jody Ann, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jonathan. So creating a culture of community. Well, as human beings, community has always been key to our survival all throughout history. And a sense of community is just as essential now as we navigate the new normal for how we live and how we work together, as it has been in times past. And in an organizational context, community is particularly critical, not only from the standpoint of survival, but it also creates an environment where employees, as they're being re-engaged, can grow and thrive as they collectively navigate this post-pandemic workplace. So let's start with the basics. What is a culture? What is a culture of community? So the word culture, we're going to do a little word study here. I'm a bit of a nerd, and I like to nerd out on words. So we'll start with the word culture. Culture finds its origins in Latin, and it means to tend and to cultivate. It goes back to horticulture and actually tending to a garden or a farm. And so when we think about a culture, We think in terms of cultivation and not control. You can't force a tree to produce fruit. And in the same way, we shouldn't be looking to force our employees to re-engage. It should be guided and not forced. And in a corporate context, the word culture actually means a set of beliefs and behaviors that guide how a company's management and employees interact and handle external business transactions. So again, coming at it from a perspective and an approach of cultivation and not control is key as you build a culture of community. So community. What is community? Now, Oxford Languages defines community as a group of people living in a same place or having a particular characteristic in common, which is the external definition. But internally, community is a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. So while the common ground for the first part of this definition may be what brings employees together as you re-engage them, or as an organization re-engages them, it's the feeling of fellowship that's in the latter part of this definition. That's what keeps them committed to and engaged with an organization, with their work, and with one another. So while the workplace and the work itself may be the framework, that external factor, the internal, that feeling of fellowship is the glue that holds the framework together and keeps employees engaged. So in the field of psychology, that feeling of fellowship I mentioned in the first definition is referred to as a sense of community. And in a groundbreaking study from 1986, the psychologists David W. McMillan and David M. Chavis found the 4 key elements of a sense of community to be membership, which is a feeling of belonging or of sharing a sense of personal relatedness; influence, which means that you matter. It means making a difference to a group and of the group mattering to its members. So it goes both ways. It also includes reinforcement. So reinforcement being the integration and fulfillment of needs and a shared personal connection. So I'd like to ask you all who are in attendance here, what is one thing that your organization currently does well that cultivates this sense of community? Let's go back to that slide and take a look at those 4 components again. And go ahead and share in the chat your organization's community building superpower. Let us know what it is that you do well. All right, Benjamin shared one. He said reinforcement. Reinforcement. Savannah and Max said shared emotional connection. Absolutely, absolutely. Gabe says that we learn more about each person so that we feed their soul. Wow, that's powerful. Anyone else? Okay, so why is a culture community a benefit to organizations as they engage employees in this post-pandemic workplace? Well, a culture of community empowers companies and organizations to do the following: to first cultivate a committed and resilient team. Now, mental toughness and grit, these aren't just buzzwords from best-selling personal development books. These days, being committed and being resilient are a necessity if your organization's team will weather the ups and the downs and changes that you're currently experiencing. It's also an opportunity to create an incubator for ingenuity and productivity. Successful organizations want to make meaningful contributions to their industries and provide clients and customers and partners with what they need. And a sense of community creates an environment within the organization where those meaningful contributions become possible. And finally, it's an opportunity for growth, an opportunity to grow as you attract top talent and opportunities. Everyone wants to be a part of a winning team, and a culture of community is incredibly inviting to A players who can add even more value to your organization. So creating a culture of community is actually a valuable and powerful strategy for any organization that's looking to navigate the new normal. So let's go through those 4 factors that foster a sense of community and make the connection for organizations for how they can incorporate these 4 factors in actionable ways to bolster that employee engagement that we're looking for now. The first being membership. Let's think about membership in 3 phases here, where organizations engage, keep, and grow their employee base. So first, with engagement or engage, it's important to start with an onboarding 2.0 experience. So in the same way that new hires begin their tenure with your organization by going through an onboarding and orientation process, in the re-engagement phase that we're all now looking at, all employees from senior executives to entry-level associates should be taken through a formalized onboarding 2.0 experience, ideally at the same time. By incorporating findings from assessments and things of that nature, an onboarding 2.0 experience sets the tone for re-engagement process with this membership experience that addresses and fulfills the unique needs of your employees. So it also serves as an opportunity to introduce any new company guidelines, processes, priorities, anything that's come about since the transition and prior to the re-engagement in a way that's cohesive and inclusive. Now, to take the membership experience a step further to keep your employees engaged, team building 2.0 and a hybridized approach to perks and to benefits packages is a must. Now, if you've been with any organization for any length of time, odds are you've participated in some sort of team building activity or benefited from the perks and the resources that come with being a part of that organization. In the new normal, whether or not an employee works in or outside the physical workspace cannot be the only component that becomes hybridized. Organizations will have to really get creative and rethink team building in this hybrid space, as well as employee benefits from a hybridization standpoint. And this is really an opportunity to stand out in the market to top talent that you're looking to attract. And finally, growth. When an organization has established a culture of community, they must work just as diligently to reinforce it with the right additions to the team and the right external relationships. So it's important to seek out culturally aligned top talent and strategic partners to fill in any gaps that may be left once you've re-engaged your team. And the key word here is alignment. They have to be a good match, a good fit for the direction that you're taking your organization.
Did we lose you, Jody Ann?
Yes, my apologies.
Okay.
Okay, I will reiterate the last point. So if an organization is looking to grow through membership, when an organization has taken the steps to establish a culture of community, they must work just as diligently to reinforce it with the right additions to the team and the right strategic partnerships. So you have to be sure to seek out culturally aligned top talent and strategic partners to fill in any gaps. Next is influence. And with this factor, it's important for organizations to actively involve their middle managers in the process, in the re-engagement process, because middle managers, studies have found, tend to really have their finger on the pulse of what your organization's needs are because of how closely they work with employees and the clients that your organization serves. So training and deputizing them as tribal leaders and allowing them, instead of from a top-down perspective, to lead from the middle out within your community also aids in the effective implementation of any changes or updates that have been made to the way that your organization functions. Influence within this space of creating a culture of community. Innovative industry leaders like Pixar and Tesla are famous for creating or utilizing creative ways to engage their employees to work together to produce the films and the automobiles that they're famous for. So things like peer-to-peer advisories, project forums, reimagining those cross-functional teams is critical at this point. Next is reinforcement. To reinforce a sense or build a sense of reinforcement and a sense of community, it's important to think through these three key things: the jobs, the people, and their workspace. First, with jobs, it's important to collaboratively rework the roles and responsibilities and team dynamics as needed. Your company is not the same, your organization is not the same as it was prior to the global disruption that we all experienced. And the roles and responsibilities for those who are working alongside your team have probably shifted as well. So it's important to invest in assessments of the skill sets, the production, the personalities, and other important qualities of your current team, and use your findings to restructure those roles and responsibilities and team dynamics as needed. Next, in dealing with people, it's important to honor the work that your employees are putting out and acknowledging and honoring their needs outside of work as well. This goes back to something that Jonathan brought up. It's going to be rather difficult for employees to separate home and work life when they are working from home. And so just tapping into that human side of, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. How would you want your needs, your work to be addressed and to be honored if you were in their shoes? So organizational leaders really have to think through this and really consider the needs and the work of their people. And finally, with workspaces, again, another opportunity to get creative as you re-engage your employees is rethinking and reworking the places where they work, whether they be physical or virtual. Something that Benjamin touched on is, prior to the pandemic, I too experienced resistance from individuals who were used to doing certain things a certain way. And when I suggested using or carrying out a meeting via Zoom, there was one instance where you would have thought I asked a gentleman to, do something really, really crazy. And so, moving with the times is so critical at this point, and rethinking the places in which this work is carried out is going to be key to the reinforcement step of creating a culture of community. So you want to take this seriously and really invest the time, the energy, and pull in the expertise if needed from outside sources to rework those physical and virtual platforms. And finally, we have a shared connection. Again, going back to the human experience and how we plug into and collaborate and engage with one another. That's what we're all here for, is to discuss this topic of employee engagement. And this also goes back to something that Jonathan emphasized in the very beginning, is the fact that employees, as human beings, want to be valued individually and know that their work means something, both individually and corporately. So re-engaging employees from a shared connection standpoint it's important to consider these three factors: identity, the teams, and the individuals themselves. So for identity, this is an opportunity to work together with your employees to reshape if needed your organization's mission and vision. When was the last time you really took a hard look at your mission and vision statements for your organization? And do your employees even know what it is? If not, then this is your opportunity to re-engage by reintroducing just that. Also with teams, creating spaces and opportunities for collaboration, consensus, and celebration. People want to be celebrated. They want their work to be acknowledged for the value that it delivers. And so collaborating on work in the first place, creating a space of consensus, and celebrating the wins is critical as well. And finally, when working with individuals, it's important that they feel safe, that they feel respected, and that they feel seen. And so employing an iterative work approach when it comes to things such as presentations, not having to have the full finished project or product, but providing them with opportunities to present what it is that they're working on without it having to be perfect is a wonderful opportunity to lessen the burden of having to get things right. And it leaves room for them to make mistakes in a safe way, to communicate, to critique their work, and offer correction where needed. So companies that engage their employees, organizations that engage their members through a culture of community have an immediate opportunity to build a committed and resilient workforce on the foundation of shared values, mutual respect, and trust. And in the long run, a culture of community provides the opportunity for an industry-defining ingenuity and productivity that, again, attracts top talent and growth opportunities in unprecedented ways. So organizations that invest in not just financially, but in their time, in their energy, in their focus, in really building a culture of community really stand to win in this post-pandemic world. So now with that, we will open it up for Q&A. We'd love to hear from you. What are your questions, your thoughts, your comments on today's presentation? Be sure to share in the chat. Oh, Muna says thanks, and we say you're welcome. It is our honor and our pleasure. And Gabe shared that a way to build a culture of community is to simply look at what we have in common. Absolutely. We have so much more common ground than we do differences when we really just take the time to look. Any other questions or commentary? Going once, going twice. Ah, wait, Max. Max is looking forward to building a culture of collaboration and partnering. Absolutely. Absolutely. We do have a raised hand from Gabe. Gabe, feel free to unmute yourself and share your thoughts or questions.
Yes. Jodianne, if you don't mind, at some point, maybe repeat the webinar purpose for those who arrived late so that they know what the webinar is about. On a substance front, elephant in the room. Despite our sense for community, we live in a very divisive world. So my question is, what are we missing? And how can we build a global sense of community? So if you can opine on that and perhaps close us out with the webinar purpose, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. Well, I want to also acknowledge our other presenters as well. Benjamin, did you have any thoughts on that, on how we can create a global sense of community, just starting where we are in our organizations?
I think one of the things that I've been actually pondering this question like a lot recently,
Yeah.
because I live on the East Coast, and I've lived on the East Coast for a while, but all my family is from the Midwest, so there's a lot of differences, like socially, just how communities function, even how they're handling the pandemic and stuff. And the thing that I think that's really fascinating is the more that you celebrate diversity, like that's one of the things that we look at from an organizational standpoint. Diversity, the more diverse that let's say a board is, or an executive team, or just a group in general, the more diverse they are in their backgrounds and their thinking, makes the team more valuable. It makes them more productive and kind of come up with better ideas. So I think being able to not always shy away from the things that we want to have those commonalities and say these are the things that we do together that we all are a part of, but also saying, you know, I respect your opinions and your differences, even if I don't necessarily understand how you came to that conclusion. I think that's figuring out a way to reinforce diverse thinking on your teams and in your organizations is really important.
Absolutely. You took the words right out of my mouth. Absolutely. Diversity is really what makes us rich. And with individuals coming together for a common goal, a common purpose, again, going back to the vision and the mission statement and that central thing. But having that as the thing that brings organizations together, but acknowledging the fact that our differences are what makes us rich is really what makes all the difference. Any other questions? Well, thank you so much for that final topic and those insightful words, Benjamin. We appreciate you. And so with that, we conclude today's webinar, but the fun doesn't stop here. The insight doesn't stop here. The engaging discussion doesn't stop here, because we have another exciting webinar right around the corner. We invite you to join us on Thursday, March 25th, 2021 at noon Eastern Time for our next webinar on the topic of applying artificial intelligence to improve everyday life. So go ahead and mark your calendars and make plans to be present for this engaging webinar. And with that, we thank you. We appreciate you for lending us your ear and taking the time to hear all about employee engagement, re-engaging employees in the new normal. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day.